The precinct of Ironwood County sat just 20 miles from the Black Slough, a swampy, forgotten region notorious for cold cases and unreliable power. It was 1 a.m., and the station was unnaturally still, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Detective Anya Sharma, a sharp, skeptical investigator known for her obsession with forensic detail, was working late. She was reviewing a case file that should have been mundane, the background check for a new patrol officer, Deputy Kenji Sato. The file was complete, impeccable training records, clean history, glowing recommendations. But one detail was impossibly wrong: the provided photograph. The photo on the resume was a standard police headshot, but it wasn't a digital image, it was a physical, printed photograph, and it was blank. A perfect, uniform square of white paper, completely devoid of an image. The silent print. Anya ran the blank photograph through the scanner, but the computer registered only a blank, white JPEG file. The physical paper was the anomaly. "Thorne, get over here," Anya called to the young night duty officer, Deputy Ben Thorne, who was struggling with a jammed paper shredder. Thorne walked over, squinting at the photo. "Looks like the printer ran out of ink, Detective." "Old resume." "It's a new print, Thorne." "And look closer." Anya pointed to the edge of the blank square. The paper was slightly thicker, and the edges were unnaturally clean, as if the paper had been trimmed with razor precision. She then placed the blank photo on the desk next to a normal, digitally printed resume. The blank square seemed to subtly absorb the light from the fluorescent fixture above, creating a small, localized area of shadow on the desk. "It's not an absence of ink, Thorne. It's an absence of light," Anya stated, her skepticism warring with a growing dread. "This paper wasn't printed, it was sanitized. Something removed the image from the paper without touching the paper itself." The contradictory file. Anya pulled up Kenji Sato's digital file. The digital version contained a perfectly normal, clear photograph of a young, professional-looking officer. She cross-referenced the file with the recommendations. Every single reference, former commanding officers, academy instructors, was glowing and absolute. They praised Sato's visible presence and attention to detail. But as she scrolled through the file, a disturbing pattern emerged in the digital records. In every single training video, every group photograph, and every logged surveillance clip spanning his career, Deputy Kenji Sato was never visible. In group photos, there would be a gap where he stood. In training videos, objects he was handling would float briefly in the air before he moved them off-screen. His voice was always recorded, but his physical presence was absent from the visual record. Thorne leaned closer to the screen. "He's not visible in any visual documentation, but every single person who worked with him praises his visibility. He's a visual paradox." "He's a ghost in the machine," Anya corrected grimly. "And someone, or something, is using the physical photograph as a key to inject this absence into our reality." The whispering resume. Anya placed the blank photograph back on the desk. Suddenly, the entire sheet of paper began to vibrate subtly. From the silent, white surface of the paper, a faint, rhythmic whispering sound began to emanate. It wasn't human speech, it was a continuous, dry, barely audible scrubbing sound, like sandpaper on wood, repeating in a dizzying rhythm. Anya used her pen to gently push the photograph. The scrubbing sound followed the movement of the paper, confirming the sound was originating from the blank square itself. The whispering, Anya murmured, recalling a phrase from the ancient, unconfirmed Black Slough legends. "The sound of memory erasure." Thorne checked the digital clock, 1:03 a.m. As the scrubbing intensified, the desk lamp directly above the photograph began to dim, flickering rapidly. And then, the impossible happened. A new line of text, written in a clear, precise black ink, began to bleed onto the surface of the blank photograph, appearing from the center outward. "The subject is not the ghost. The ghost is the absence." The scrubbing sound stopped. The lamp returned to full brightness. The photograph was inert, but the chilling message remained. "The subject isn't Sato," Anya stated, staring at the message. "The ghost is the absence he embodies. And it's communicating through the one thing that should be absolute, the physical record." Anya grabbed her coat and the photograph. "We need to find the source of the physical resume. The absence is actively seeking to anchor itself in our station, and the key is in this paper." Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne immediately focused on the blank photograph, the physical anchor for the absence. The whispering, the dry, rhythmic scrubbing sound, had stopped, leaving the single, chilling inscription, "The subject is not the ghost. The ghost is the absence." Tracing the anomaly. Anya used a high-powered forensic light to examine the blank photograph. Under the light, the absence of light effect was magnified. The paper didn't reflect the forensic UV light, it seemed to swallow it. She then discovered the source of the physical resume. The envelope it arrived in was postmarked from a small, isolated postal branch located on the extreme northern edge of the Black Slough. This area was geographically significant. It was the boundary of signal loss, where all radio and GPS reception abruptly failed. Anya directed Thorne to pull the records for the postal branch. The branch served only one known address, the long-abandoned Ironwood County Print House, which specialized in large-scale, historical document printing before it was shut down in the 1970s. The absence is anchored to a location that deals exclusively in physical documentation and sits on the edge of signal failure, Anya summarized, grabbing the keys to an unmarked unit. "The ghost isn't digital, it's a phenomenon of analog record. The print house of erasure." They drove to the print house, the journey growing silent as they crossed the line of signal failure. The building was a decaying relic, its huge printing presses still visible through the grimy windows. The air inside smelled strongly of old, dried ink and ozone. In the main office, they found the source of the persistent absence. A single, massive, antique photographic enlarger stood in the middle of the room, still plugged in. It was completely dry, but the internal light bulb was emitting a faint, pervasive, inverted light, a subtle, negative glow that darkened the space immediately around it. Resting on the enlarger's base was a stack of identical, perfectly trimmed, blank white photographs, the raw paper stock used for the resume. Thorne picked up one of the blank sheets. It was cold to the touch and immediately began to emit the low, dry whispering, the scrubbing sound of memory erasure. "This is the print of absence," Anya realized, her voice hushed. "The enlarger is somehow capable of removing the light from the paper, creating a pure blank. The subject's memory." Anya checked the enlarger's internal controls. The timer was set to exactly 13 minutes and 42 seconds, a specific, repeating duration. She found a heavily bound logbook next to the enlarger, dated 1972, the year the print house closed. It was the journal of the last foreman, Mr. Silas Finch. The final entry detailed an incident. Finch described accidentally exposing a batch of photographic paper to a massive electrical surge during a lightning storm. The surge didn't burn the paper, it drained the memory. "The paper is bleached white, but when I place it near the ear, it whispers. It's the sound of the image being pulled off the emulsion. I measured the drain. It happens over 13 minutes and 42 seconds. The journal went on to reveal the true nature of Deputy Kenji Sato. Sato was the foreman's son. He had been working at the print house the night of the surge. The electrical event hadn't killed him, but it had somehow contaminated him, turning him into the absence. He was functionally present but visually unrecordable, a flaw in the visual record. The foreman, driven mad, believed the blank paper was the only way to save his son. He created a batch of blank prints, the prints of absence, to try and contain the visual nothingness his son had become. The foreman's final, chilling note: Kenji is the subject. The absence is the ghost. the ghost is now strong enough to use Kenji's name to print its existence into the public record. As Anya finished reading, the sound of the whispering intensified, coming from all the blank sheets of paper. The inverted light from the enlarger flared, and a new, physical detail appeared in the corner of the room, a small, dark, two-dimensional shadow, but this shadow was being cast away from the enlarger's light source. The absence was manifesting its own shadow. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne were trapped inside the abandoned Ironwood County print house, the birthplace of the anomaly. The inverted light from the photographic enlarger was producing a small, physical, two-dimensional shadow that moved against the light source. The absence was manifesting its own shadow. The anti-shadow. The shadow was pure, unadulterated black, consuming the light immediately around it. It moved with a slow, deliberate slide, seeking to touch the nearest light source, the bare bulb hanging above the main printing press. It's not just an absence of light, it's an anti-shadow, Anya observed, keeping her distance. It's a two-dimensional patch of total darkness. If it touches the light source, it might collapse the entire visual spectrum in the building. Thorne remembered the logbook entry. The anomaly needed 13 minutes and 42 seconds to fully drain the light from an image. The timer on the enlarger. It's set to the exact duration of the drain, Thorne yelled. The absence is using that time cycle to achieve full manifestation. They had to disable the enlarger and stop the production of the prints of absence before the anti-shadow reached the light. Anya spotted a massive, antique paper cutter, a thick, cast-iron machine with a heavy, razor-sharp blade, sitting near the enlarger. The absence is an analog phenomenon, Anya stated, her eyes fixed on the cutter. It's vulnerable to overwhelming, analog destruction. The paper trap. The anti-shadow was now halfway across the room, gliding silently towards the overhead light. Thorne rushed to the enlarger, quickly stacking all the blank, whispering photographs onto the base of the paper cutter. He positioned the stack directly beneath the blade. Anya provided the countermeasure. She grabbed a small, reflective metal tray used for developing photographs. She angled the tray to reflect the enlarger's inverted light directly back onto the machine's glass lens, hoping to disrupt the output cycle. The moment the reflected light hit the lens, the enlarger's motor sputtered violently. The rhythmic whispering from the stack of blank paper intensified into a unified, high-pitched scream, the sound of the absence fighting the disruption. The anti-shadow immediately stopped its glide and turned, sensing the threat to its paper anchor. It moved rapidly toward the paper cutter. "Now, Thorne!" Anya yelled. Thorne brought the heavy, razor-sharp blade of the cutter down with crushing force onto the thick stack of prints of absence. The sound was not a simple slice, it was a loud, sickening thwomp followed by a brief, agonizing digital distortion that seemed to tear the air itself. The ghost of Sato. The anti-shadow instantly dissolved. The enlarger's motor stopped, and the inverted light died. The room was plunged into normal darkness, broken only by Thorne's flashlight. The immediate crisis was over. The physical anchor of the absence was destroyed. As they examined the paper cutter, they found a small, crumpled piece of paper that had fallen out during the slice. It wasn't white, it was a faded, sepia-toned photograph from the 1970s. The photo showed the final image the enlarger had been working on, a picture of the print house foreman, Silas Finch, standing proudly next to his son, Kenji Sato, the subject of the ghost resume. But the image was unstable. As Anya held the photograph, the image of Kenji Sato began to subtly fade, then immediately snapped back to full visibility, repeating the cycle of appearance and erasure. The absence hadn't been destroyed, it had been forced back into its original host, the memory of Kenji Sato. And then, the sound returned. Not the scrubbing whispering, but a clear, close, human whisper right behind Anya. "The record is fixed. The file is closed. I am here." Anya spun around, her flashlight beam sweeping the room. No one was there. but lying on the ground, where the anti-shadow had been, was a single, small object, a standard police-issue badge, engraved with the number 404, the International Code 4, file not found. The badge belonged to Deputy Kenji Sato. He wasn't just a ghost in the visual record, he was now physically present, having been forced back into reality by the destruction of the Prince of Absence. And he was standing in the shadows of the print house. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne had destroyed the Prince of Absence, forcing the ghost subject, Deputy Kenji Sato, out of the visual void and into physical manifestation. The unsettling proof was the sudden appearance of his police badge, number 404, file not found, and the distinct human whisper, "I am here." The stuttered appearance. Thorne and Anya swept the print house with their flashlights. The air was heavy, but the sound was gone. Suddenly, a figure appeared near the main entrance, Deputy Kenji Sato. He was exactly as the digital file described, young, clean-cut, wearing a crisp, new Ironwood County Patrol uniform. He stood perfectly still, his eyes wide and fixed on Anya. But his appearance was inherently unstable. He wasn't flickering, he was stuttering. Every movement he made was slightly lagged. He would begin to raise his hand, and the complete motion would snap into place a fraction of a second later, creating a jarring, discontinuous presence. "Deputy Sato," Anya said firmly, raising her weapon. "Stand down." Sato did not comply. He began to move toward them, his progress a series of rapid, unnatural visual jumps. I am, the record," Sato's voice stuttered, layered with the faintest trace of the dry, scrubbing whispering. The file must be closed." Thorne recognized the danger. Sato wasn't entirely in control, his movements were governed by the absence attempting to stabilize its physical form through visual contradiction. The unstable uniform. Anya noticed a crucial detail about Sato's uniform. It was perfectly crisp, but the Ironwood County patch on his shoulder was subtly distorting. The embroidered threads were shifting and warping, as if the light reflecting off them was actively being pulled away and then snapped back. "He's using the analog memory of the uniform to anchor himself," Anya shouted to Thorne. "The cloth is a physical record of the department. We need to disrupt his visual anchor." Thorne grabbed a nearby bucket of thin, sticky, decades-old printing emulsion, a thick, opaque chemical used in the press. As Sato approached, his movements becoming more rapid and violent, Thorne hurled the bucket of emulsion directly at Sato's chest. The chemical struck Sato with a loud, wet slap. The thick, opaque substance coated the front of his uniform, covering the patch and his face. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Sato did not stagger, he froze mid-stride, his form rendered immobile by the thick, opaque coating. The absence required a visual record to exist in the physical world. By coating his uniform and face in the thick, light-absorbing emulsion, Thorne had temporarily blinded the visual anchor, trapping the absence within the physical body. The final submission. Sato did not struggle or fight. He simply stood, immobile, encased in the opaque emulsion. The faint, internal scrubbing whispering now emanated solely from Sato's chest. Anya approached cautiously, using a long piece of pipe to gently scrape the emulsion away from the chest patch. As the patch became visible, a new, intricate pattern began to form on the embroidered threads. The threads were slowly, mathematically unraveling from the patch, forming a dense, complex pattern that resembled a series of cascading digital characters. It was code. The absence was writing its final truth onto the only stable, analog surface left, the cloth of the uniform. The code was not random. It was a clear, precise series of alphanumeric digits, a GPS coordinate that pointed directly into the deepest, most inaccessible part of the Black Slough. And beneath the coordinates, the code unraveled to form a final message, written not in ink, but in the white space of the unraveling threads. The source is the negative. The image is in the mud. The absence, the ghost, had used its host, Kenji Sato, to deliver the coordinates to its true anchor, a negative image buried in the sludge of the Black Slough. Anya used a pair of scissors to carefully cut the entire patch off the uniform, securing the code. The moment the patch was removed, the immobile body of Kenji Sato collapsed onto the floor with a hollow, dry thud, inert. The absence had used the uniform patch as its final communication link and abandoned the host. The ghost subject was gone, leaving behind only the coordinates to the ultimate source of the visual void. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne secured the inert body of Kenji Sato and the crucial clue, the GPS coordinates pointing deep into the Black Slough, accompanied by the message, "The source is the negative. The image is in the mud." The boundary of visual noise. They quickly outfitted a light-duty swamp vehicle and followed the coordinates into the thick, treacherous mud and stagnant water of the Black Slough. The location was deep within the area known for persistent visual disturbances and static on old equipment. As they drove, the atmosphere grew increasingly humid and oppressive. The light filtering through the dense cypress trees was strangely muted, almost colorless. Thorne pulled out a specialized camera designed for low-light forensic work. As soon as he powered it on, the screen erupted in chaotic static. "It's not just signal loss, Detective," Thorne noted, adjusting the lens. "The camera is registering a massive amount of visual noise, pure random light pulses, so intense it's collapsing the sensor." Anya realized the connection. The absence was born from the erasure of light. The Black Slough, saturated with decay and dark matter, provided the perfect environment for visual contradiction. The physical decomposition was generating a form of visual chaos that the anomaly fed upon. The monochromatic pool. The coordinates led them to a small, isolated pool of water, distinct from the surrounding sludge. The water was unnaturally clear, almost crystalline, yet the mud at the bottom was dense and jet black. And floating in the center of the pool was the anomaly. It wasn't a photograph, it was a small, three-dimensional object, gently rotating on the surface of the water. It was an antique, cylindrical camera lens, partially submerged. The glass was not reflecting light, it was emitting a faint, pervasive, inverted light, a soft, monochromatic glow that seemed to suck the color out of the surrounding vegetation. This was the true source of the absence. Anya carefully used a long-handled net to retrieve the lens. The moment the lens left the water, the pool immediately turned murky and dark, reverting to normal swamp water. As she held the lens, the air around it grew intensely cold, and the rhythmic whispering, the sound of memory erasure, returned, now emanating directly from the glass. The memory scourge. Thorne found a small, rusted metal box half buried in the mud near the pool. It was the lens's original container. Inside, lined with velvet, was a single, brittle, antique photographic negative. The negative was large and square, clearly intended for a vintage camera. It wasn't an image of a person or a place. It was an abstract photograph of a massive, complex geometric shape, rendered in perfect, shimmering black and white. The shape was impossible, a dense, swirling vortex of interwoven lines and angles, collapsing in on itself. Anya placed the lens against the negative. The effect was immediate and violent. The inverted light from the lens focused onto the geometric negative, and the entire negative began to vibrate, emitting a powerful, subsonic hum that shook the very ground. The hum was followed by a clear, synthesized voice that boomed through the surrounding trees. "The grid is now visible. The absence is the truth. You have unsealed the anchor." The absence was not a random ghost, it was a structural entity, a geometric grid captured on the negative. The original electrical surge at the print house hadn't destroyed the paper, it had exposed the emulsion to the pure, geometric concept of absence itself, trapping it in the negative. The final warning. The hum stopped. The lens and the negative were inert, but the atmosphere was charged. Anya and Thorne scrambled back toward their vehicle. As they turned, they saw the geometric shape from the negative manifest in the surrounding swamp mist. It wasn't physical, it was an illusion of light and shadow, a massive, silent, swirling vortex of lines and angles that pulsed with the light-draining, monochromatic glow. And within the vortex, they saw a fleeting image, the face of Silas Finch, the print house foreman, contorted in a silent scream, followed by the appearance of the ghost of Kenji Sato, his features briefly visible before being immediately scrubbed away. The absence was demonstrating its power. It consumed light and memory, trapping the visual record of its victims within its structure. The final message appeared, not on paper, but etched into the mud near their feet, appearing as a geometric pattern of displaced water. The grid requires a volume of light. The memory is the emulsion. Bring me the film. The absence was demanding more memory, specifically, film, a vast, volumetric analog record, to stabilize its geometric structure and fully manifest its collapse on the physical world. They had to find a massive, localized archive of film before the absence could absorb it. Anya immediately thought of the only place in Ironwood County with that kind of historical visual volume, the County Archives and Historical Film Repository. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne sped away from the Black Slough, leaving the silent, geometric vortex of the absence behind. They had the core anchor, the geometric negative and the antique camera lens, but the entity was now demanding a massive volume of analog light memory, film, specifically located at the County Archives and Historical Film Repository. The Siren of Light. The repository was a sprawling, subterranean bunker designed to preserve delicate celluloid and photographic materials. As they approached, the exterior was bathed in an unnatural, flickering light. It wasn't a fire, it was a rhythmic, silent strobe. Every exterior light fixture was cycling rapidly between intense white and absolute black, perfectly in sync with the rhythm of the dry, scrubbing whispering they had heard earlier. The absence is testing the light source, Anya observed grimly. It's trying to find the maximum volume of light it can erase instantly. They found the heavy steel doors of the repository already open. Inside, the massive entrance hall was plunged into disorienting, rapid darkness and light. Thorne pulled out a specialized analog sound meter. The meter instantly spiked, registering the faint, high-frequency whispering, now so pervasive it was vibrating the very structure of the building. The voice of the absence, cold and synthesized, echoed through the hallway, amplified by the hard, reflective surfaces. The emulsion is ready. The volume is mine. The collapse is the truth. The film vault. They descended into the main film vault, a vast room lined with shelves holding thousands of reels of historical film. The temperature was freezing, but the air felt charged. The chaos of light was concentrated here. The small, red safety lights designed to protect the film from overexposure were not flickering, they were undergoing temporal distortion. The light would appear, then snap back an instant later, creating a visual stutter in the red glow. They spotted the target, a central, archival table covered in reels of film. But the reels were not static. They were subtly unraveling, spinning slowly and deliberately, pulling the fragile celluloid off the spools. As the film unspooled, the celluloid, the physical record of light, was being drawn toward a single point in the center of the table where the absence was manifesting. The manifestation was an evolving version of the anti-shadow, a rotating, three-dimensional pyramid of pure darkness, slowly growing in size as the film unraveled and fed the structure. The analog counter-strike. The absence is geometrically stable now, Thorne shouted over the frantic, rhythmic scrubbing. It's absorbing the volumetric light memory from the film to achieve full three-dimensional manifestation. Anya grabbed the negative and the antique lens, the source and the focus of the anomaly, from her evidence kit. We reversed the process. Anya yelled. We forced the source to focus on its own destruction. They had to expose the geometric negative to a massive volume of light simultaneously with the unfolding film, an overwhelming analog counterstrike to shatter the developing pyramid of darkness. Anya spotted a bank of powerful, analog film editing lamps, heavy, powerful fixtures designed for quick, intense light exposure during restoration. She directed Thorne to aim the lamps at the central table. Thorne flipped the main switch. The editing lamps burst to life, flooding the film vault with blinding, unfiltered white light. Anya then held the geometric negative up to the blinding light. The inverted light from the antique lens focused the light directly onto the swirling vortex on the negative. The image of destruction. The chaos was instantaneous. The geometric pyramid of darkness shrieked, emitting a high-frequency digital screech that resonated through the vault. The combined force of the analog light hitting the geometric negative and the massive volume of film being exposed forced the absence into overload. The pyramid of darkness did not dissolve, it violently exploded, collapsing in on itself in a flash of monochromatic white light. The light was followed by a chilling sound, the faint, receding human scream of Silas Finch, the print house foreman, swallowed by the noise. When the light subsided, the film vault was silent. The unraveling film reels fell inert. The geometric pyramid was gone. But on the polished concrete floor, where the pyramid had been, a single, terrifying image remained, not a shadow, but a massive, clean square of absolute white, precisely the size of the collapsed pyramid's base. It was a perfect, two-dimensional print of absence, etched into the floor itself. And at the center of the white square, a new, precise message was written, etched into the concrete by the intense energy collapse. The void is hungry. Next stop, the sound. The absence had failed to consume the film, but it had learned its next target, sound. The anomaly was moving from the visual record to the auditory record, seeking a new medium for its geometric manifestation. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne had defeated the absence's attempt to consume the visual memory of the film archive. The anomaly's final, chilling message etched into the concrete pointed to its next target, sound. The siren of silence. Anya secured the two core artifacts, the geometric negative and the antique lens, and they returned to the station to analyze the new threat. The absence was transitioning from a visual paradox to an auditory one. The absence feeds on the lack of light, Anya mused, reviewing old transcripts. Its natural state is the scrubbing whispering, the sound of visual erasure. It's moving to the auditory realm to find a source of silence it can corrupt. They cross-referenced local archives for any location renowned for its auditory absence or historical sound anomalies. The search led them to the Ironwood County Public Radio Station, WICR, specifically its rarely used, deep subterranean anechoic chamber, a room designed to achieve near-perfect, absolute silence. This chamber was geographically significant. It sat directly above a known, large, subterranean deposit of quartz crystal, which the SGI documents, pulled from the old print house files, indicated was an excellent conductor of focused, high-frequency sound waves. The perfect absence. They arrived at the WICR facility. The outside was quiet, but the air felt charged. Thorne brought in a specialized frequency scanner. As they descended into the sublevel containing the anechoic chamber, the scanner began to register an intense, repeating subsonic pulse. The pulse was not random, it followed the exact rhythm of the initial whispering. The anechoic chamber was sealed with a heavy, soundproof door. Thorne used the station manager's emergency key card to gain access. The room was disorienting. Lined with massive, fiberglass wedges designed to absorb every sound wave, the chamber achieved near-total silence. The absence of ambient sound was physically painful, creating a deep, resonant pressure in their ears. At the center of the chamber was a single, large, antiquated reel-to-reel audio recorder, powered on and actively running. The recorder was not recording sound, it was recording silence. The magnetic tape was spinning, capturing the lack of sound waves in the chamber. And as the tape spun, the source of the anomaly became clear. The rhythmic whispering, the scrubbing sound, was emanating from the spinning magnetic tape itself. The geometric tone. The absence is attempting to overwrite the perfect silence with its own erasure pattern, Anya whispered, her voice muffled by the soundproofing. The tape is capturing the geometric concept of nothingness. Thorne pointed to the recorder's built-in speaker. A faint, low-frequency tone was being emitted. It was a pure, resonant sine wave, but it was accompanied by a subtle, disorienting visual wobble in the light above the recorder. The absence is inverting its pattern, Thorne observed. It's using the perfect auditory silence to generate a visual distortion. Anya quickly checked the reels. The tape was an archival master reel from the 1960s, labeled WICR Founding Broadcast, 13 minutes 42 seconds of silence. The tape was playing a ceremonial recording of the chamber's initial activation, a period of precisely 13 minutes and 42 seconds of recorded silence. The absence was leveraging its initial temporal signature, 1342, to corrupt the perfect, recorded absence of sound. As they watched, the faint tone being emitted by the speaker began to morph. It was splitting, not into a musical chord, but into three distinct, mathematically dissonant frequencies: FA, FB, FC, the sonic signature of a looming geometric collapse. The final erasure. The synthesized voice of the absence boomed from the speaker, no longer confined to the scrubbing sound. The volume is silence. The grid will be audible. The subject is the truth. The geometric tone intensified, and the air around the recorder began to physically shake. The ceiling light fixture was not wobbling, it was rapidly transforming, its round shape warping into a sharp, rigid triangle before snapping back. The absence was using the sound to impose its geometric will onto the visual dimension. Anya knew they had to inject a massive amount of auditory chaos into the perfect silence to shatter the geometric tone before it reached full resonance. She grabbed the one object that was inherently chaotic and contained a vast volume of audio information, her police-issued digital evidence recorder, filled with hours of unedited, noisy street-level surveillance. "We give the absence the antithesis of silence," Anya yelled. She threw open the soundproof chamber door, allowing the rush of normal, noisy air to flood the chamber. She then placed her digital recorder next to the reel-to-reel and pressed play, turning the volume to maximum. The chamber instantly flooded with the chaotic, overwhelming cacophony of street noise, static, and muffled human voices. The absence shrieked. The geometric tone being emitted by the reel-to-reel instantly flattened and was swallowed by the acoustic chaos. The reel-to-reel recorder sputtered and died, the magnetic tape snapping violently. The absence had failed to corrupt the silence. But as the noise receded, Thorne pointed to the shattered magnetic tape. The fragmented tape was lying on the floor, and where the magnetic dust had settled, a final message had been physically spelled out. The subject is not deleted. The source is the light. The absence had failed to anchor to the sound, but it had learned its final lesson: the ultimate medium of memory is light. The subject, Kenji Sato, was not deleted, and the source of his visual contamination was directly tied to a physical object of pure, contained light. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne had successfully disrupted the absence's attempt to anchor itself to the auditory record, but the entity left a final, critical message spelled out in magnetic dust: the subject is not deleted. The source is the light. The subject, Kenji Sato, was its physical host, and the final anchor was a physical object of pure, contained light. The subject's anchor. They returned to the print house, the site of the original contamination, to re-examine the inert body of Kenji Sato. The anomaly's pattern suggested that the absence was now attempting to reintegrate with its host body using the final, crucial source of light. They focused their forensic light on Sato's eyes. They were open, but dull, reflecting no light. However, Anya noticed a faint, almost imperceptible phosphorescent glow emanating from the tissue behind his left eye socket. "The source is internalized," Anya stated, her voice tight. The electrical surge didn't just drain the visual memory, it implanted a physical object of light into the subject's body. They performed a quick, localized X-ray scan on the head. The results were immediate and startling. Lodged precisely in the center of the subject's brain, behind the optical nerve, was a small, perfectly geometric object. It was a perfectly clear, flawless quartz crystal, about the size of a marble. "The quartz deposit under the radio station," Thorne murmured, recalling the SGI files. "The crystal is a conductor of focused, high-frequency waves. It's not just a conductor, it's a temporal battery." Anya realized the terrifying function. The electrical surge had fused a piece of the subterranean quartz into Sato's brain. The crystal was constantly emitting a focused, light-draining frequency, turning Sato into a perpetual absence field, the perfect host for the geometric entity. The geometric frequency. The crystal was the ultimate key. The absence was not just a ghost, it was the geometric grid's consciousness, and the crystal was its permanent vessel of light, constantly supplying the erasure frequency. They realized the crucial paradox: to remove the absence, the consciousness, they had to remove the source, the light-emitting crystal. But removing the crystal would completely destabilize the anomaly, triggering a final, massive visual collapse of their current reality. As they debated the procedure, the air around Sato's body grew intensely cold. The subtle, rhythmic scrubbing sound, the whispering, returned, emanating solely from the subject's body. The whispering was followed by a physical manifestation. The geometric grid, the complex, swirling pattern from the negative, began to shimmer, not in the air, but on the surface of the subject's skin. The lines and angles were visibly tracing themselves across the skin, preparing to impose its structure on the host's physical form. The synthetic voice of the absence spoke, emanating from the subject's mouth. "The vessel is perfect. The collapse is the truth. I am the truth." The inverse focus. Anya knew they had to disrupt the crystal's frequency before the grid imposed its geometry. They had two analog countermeasures. The geometric negative, the original, chaotic recording of the absence. The antique lens, the original focusing mechanism of the absence. "The crystal is emitting light, the negative is a record of light absence," Anya stated. "We forced the crystal to focus its own light onto the negative, creating an inverse focus." They quickly stabilized the inert body of Sato, placing the antique lens directly over his left eye, aligning it with the glowing quartz crystal. Thorne held the large, geometric negative directly in front of the lens. The moment the lens focused the crystal's internal light onto the negative, the crystal shrieked. The light pouring from the subject's eye was instantly sucked into the dense emulsion of the negative. The negative did not turn white, it instantly, violently began to dissolve, its emulsion tearing apart as the pure, focused light of the crystal overwhelmed the emulsion's capacity to contain the light's absence. The geometric grid tracing itself on the subject's skin vanished instantly. The whispering stopped. The absence was being forcefully ejected from its host. The subject's plea. The subject's eyes snapped open. For the first time, they reflected light, but they were filled with sheer terror. Kenji Sato was momentarily free of the consciousness, and he spoke, his voice clear and frantic, no longer layered with the scrub of the absence. The projector. The original, the casing. It's the only way to contain the truth. Lock it, back into the casing." Sato's eyes went dull again. The absence was attempting to reassert itself, but the link was fractured. The subject's final word was the key. The original equipment used by the foreman, Silas Finch, a projector, must hold the physical casing capable of trapping the geometric consciousness. They had to find the projector casing and lock the absence into it before the geometric grid reformed. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne had achieved a temporary victory. The inverse focus shattered the geometric negative and briefly freed Kenji Sato, who revealed the final anchor, the original projector casing used by his father, the foreman Silas Finch. This casing was the only object capable of containing the now freed geometric consciousness of the absence. The final analog anchor. They knew the projector had to be located in the print house, the origin point of the analog contamination. They raced back to the main printing room, searching for a device that would logically complement the enlarger and the cutter. They found it in a locked, lead-lined storage cabinet, a large, cumbersome, early 20th century film projector, designed for historical documentary display. It was massive, black, and felt unnaturally cold to the touch. They ignored the film reel assembly and focused on the projector casing, the heavily shielded, cast-iron housing surrounding the main lens and lamp. Anya used a heavy wrench to pry open the casing. Inside, the components were fused with metallic oxidation, but the central lamp housing was pristine, lined with a smooth, highly reflective, non-photographic silver alloy. This silver alloy isn't for projection, it's for containment, Cole realized. It absorbs light without recording the image. It's the ultimate analog trap. The geometric pursuit. As they worked, the rhythmic whispering returned, this time not from the subject, but from the air itself. The absence was reforming its structure outside the physical realm, drawn by the opening of the final anchor. The air in the room grew heavy and pressurized. Suddenly, the chaotic, swirling geometric grid from the destroyed negative began to manifest again, not as a shadow or a mist, but as a silent, visible distortion of the air, a three-dimensional lattice of shimmering lines filling the room. The absence was no longer merely corrupting a visual record, it was warping physical space itself, imposing its destructive geometry onto the print house. The lattice began to pulse, and the familiar synthetic voice echoed, but it was layered with a new sound, the high-frequency sound of tearing paper, growing rapidly louder. The casing is the cage. The truth is the fold. You cannot trap the absence. The sound of tearing paper intensified until it was a deafening roar. The lattice of geometric lines began to physically press inward on the room, cracking the window panes and bending the metal shelves. The absence was collapsing the structure into its own geometric pattern. The light of ejection. Anya knew they had to act quickly. The absence was attempting to force the final fold before they could seal the casing. They had two artifacts of contradiction. The antique lens, the original focus of the absence's light-draining field. The quartz crystal, now inert, removed from Sato's body the source of the light-draining frequency. We used the crystal's raw energy, focused by the lens, to blast the absence into the casing. Anya yelled. Thorne grabbed the inert quartz crystal, the temporal battery, and placed it inside the projector's lamp housing, the silver alloy trap. Anya then positioned the antique lens outside the casing, aiming it directly into the lamp housing, where the crystal rested. The massive geometric lattice pressing against them began to distort, recognizing the trap. It shrieked, and the sound of tearing paper reached a crescendo. Thorne, using a heavy hammer, delivered a massive, targeted blow to the casing. The impact was designed to momentarily activate the inert quartz crystal through kinetic shock. The moment the hammer struck the casing, the quartz crystal flared with an intense, blinding burst of its original light-draining frequency. This focused, concentrated negative light, the very substance of the absence, was instantly sucked into the light-absorbing silver alloy of the casing. The three-dimensional lattice of the geometric grid collapsed instantly, dissolving into a massive, silent implosion of darkness and cold. The sealed record. The print house was silent. The windows were cracked, but the structure was intact. Thorne quickly sealed the heavy, cast-iron projector casing. The absence, the geometric consciousness, was physically trapped inside the silver alloy. They looked at the sealed casing, now cold and heavy. They had successfully contained the anomaly. But as they secured the casing, they noticed a faint, dry, rhythmic scrubbing sound, the whispering, coming not from the casing, but from the pocket where Anya had placed the projector key. Anya pulled out the key. It was a simple, brass key, but etched into its surface, in perfect geometric patterns, was the final message. The key is the memory. The absence is the lock. The absence was physically sealed, but its core consciousness, the whispering, had transferred its final geometric pattern onto the key. The anomaly was no longer a physical threat, but a persistent analog contamination that now existed in the very tool used to secure it. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne secured the projector casing, successfully containing the geometric consciousness of the absence. However, the entity's core pattern, the whispering, had transferred onto the projector key, turning it into a persistent analog contamination. The final etched message was, "The key is the memory. The absence is the lock. The contaminated memory." They returned to the temporary precinct, placing the heavy, inert projector casing inside the reinforced evidence locker. Thorne placed the projector key, the analog contamination, on a sensor pad to monitor its frequency. The key was physically silent, but the sensors registered a continuous, low-level vibration corresponding precisely to the dry, scrubbing whispering. The geometric pattern etched onto the brass was now acting as a permanent antenna for the absence's memory signature. Anya realized the crucial danger: the absence was now the key to its own cage. Anyone touching the key would be immediately exposed to the memory-erasing frequency. They cross-referenced the geometric pattern on the key with the recovered files of the foreman, Silas Finch. Finch's notes revealed that the pattern was a custom cipher he developed to encrypt photographic memory before his final descent into madness. The absence hadn't just copied the cipher, it had corrupted it, transforming the encryption key into a de-encryption key for the memory of its victims. The subject's final record. Anya then focused on the last pieces of physical evidence related to the subject, Kenji Sato. The initial blank resume photograph. The discarded, opaque-coated uniform patch containing the GPS coordinates. She placed the resume photograph near the contaminated projector key. The blank photo subtly began to react. Instead of emitting the scrubbing sound, the paper absorbed the frequency from the key. And then, the impossible happened. A faint, ethereal image began to bleed onto the paper from the edges inward, the ghost of the photograph that should have been there. It was the face of Kenji Sato, but his features were fleeting, shimmering between presence and absence. The key's frequency was de-erasing the subject's visual memory from the paper. As the image became marginally clearer, new, intense auditory paradox erupted, two distinct sounds layered over each other. A high, clear voice, a panicked, human voice, Sato's, repeating a name. A low, metallic click, a precise, rhythmic mechanical sound. Sato's voice was yelling, "Rina! Rina!" The absence had not just erased memory, it had substituted a new, rhythmic memory, the clicking, to mask the subject's final spoken word. The name and the click. Anya quickly isolated the clicking sound and ran it through an audio filter. The pattern was highly complex, matching the frequency of a specialized machine they hadn't yet encountered, an antique film perforator. The click is the sound of a perforator, Thorne identified. It punches precise, geometric holes into the film strip to align it for projection. It's the ultimate geometric stabilizer for light memory. They realized the full scope of the subject's tragedy. Kenji Sato's final act wasn't just to shout a name, it was to punch a geometric code into a piece of film, hoping to encode the location of Rina before the absence fully consumed him. Anya cross-referenced the name Rina with the foreman's journal. Rina was Silas Finch's daughter and Kenji Sato's fiancée. She vanished the night of the electrical surge, a cold case never solved. The final memory the subject had tried to save wasn't visual or auditory, it was geometric. The final film strip. They returned to the print house one last time. Following the logical trail of the perforator, they found a small, hidden storage drawer beneath the cutter table. Inside the drawer, they found a single, brittle strip of celluloid film, exactly the width used by the antique perforator. The film was blank, but along the edges, it was punched with a series of clean, precise, geometric holes that formed an intricate, rhythmic pattern. This was the subject's final record, the geometric code of memory, encoded into the physical medium of film by the rhythmic click. Anya placed the film strip against the contained projector casing. The casing instantly grew intensely cold. The absence, trapped inside, was attempting to read the geometric code. Anya knew the risk was immense. If the absence successfully read the code, it would gain access to the memory of Rina and its full geometric potential. They had to destroy the coded film strip, the final piece of the subject's memory, before the absence could translate the geometric code and truly become the lock. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne faced the final threat, the celluloid strip containing the subject's last message. The geometric code of memory for Rina lay against the contained projector casing. The trapped absence was attempting to read the code, which would allow it to fully comprehend the physical location of the final victim. The final geometric code. The film strip, punched with the precise, rhythmic holes of the perforator, represented the last analog memory of Kenji Sato. If the absence translated this code, its containment in the casing would fail, and the entity would physically manifest at Rina's location. Anya knew they couldn't just burn the film. The rapid, chaotic destruction of the pure geometric code would release a final, catastrophic burst of the absence's energy, collapsing the structure of the entire precinct. They had to destroy the film strip using a precise, controlled inverse perforation, a destructive action that mirrored the creation of the code, thus neutralizing the geometric information. Thorne remembered the original, large paper cutter that had destroyed the Prince of Absence. It was massive, analog, and delivered overwhelming physical force. They raced to retrieve the cutter's heavy, razor-sharp blade, bringing it back to the temporary precinct's evidence room. The inverse punch. They had the three critical components for the counteraction: the geometric code, the film strip, the contaminated key, the brass key with the etched geometric cipher. The inverse force, the cutter blade. Anya placed the celluloid film strip on the counter. She then placed the brass projector key, the analog contamination carrying the memory-erasing cipher, directly over the film strip. The key's cipher is the reverse of the code, Anya explained, her eyes fixed on the blade. When we punch, the key will physically force the film to absorb the erasure cipher at the moment of destruction. The rhythm of the whispering intensified, coming from the casing in the locked evidence room. The absence was sensing the imminent threat to its information. Thorne, using the heavy, detached cutter blade, delivered a controlled, precise impact onto the brass key and the film strip beneath it. The sound was a single, clean snap, the sound of the film strip shattering, immediately followed by the high-frequency metallic clack of the brass key being momentarily crushed. The result was a stunning auditory release. The shattering film released a single, loud, perfect female scream, the preserved auditory memory of Rina. The scream was immediately followed by a final, profound, thundering silence. The whispering stopped entirely. The location of the subject. The film strip was destroyed. The absence was silent. The projector casing in the evidence room was cold and inert. The key lay on the table, bent and broken, its geometric cipher shattered. They had destroyed the geometric memory and freed the final auditory memory. Anya analyzed the shattered key. The brass, weakened by the impact, had fractured precisely at the coordinates of the geometric code, the location of Rina. The coordinates led to a deep, forgotten drainage cistern located beneath the foundation of the old Ironwood County print house. Anya and Thorne raced back to the print house, their hearts pounding. They knew the cistern, a forgotten access shaft, was the likely location where Silas Finch hid his daughter's body after the surge. They found the cistern shaft, sealed with a heavy, rusted lid. With immense effort, they pried it open, revealing a vertical drop into the darkness. The final photograph. Shining their flashlights down, they saw the final, heartbreaking scene. At the bottom of the cistern, the water was shallow, filled with mud and historical sludge. Resting on a small, dry ledge was a figure, Rina. She was not a body. She was fully materialized, physically whole, dressed in clothing from the 1970s. She was standing perfectly still, holding an object in her hands. As the light hit her, she looked up. Her eyes were dull, lifeless, and filled with the same empty absence that had defined her fiancé, Kenji Sato. Rina spoke, her voice flat and monotone, layered with the synthetic tone of the absence. The memory is contained. The subject is complete. She held out the object she was holding, a perfectly preserved, sepia-toned photograph of Kenji Sato and Silas Finch, the original image before the contamination. She's the analog archive, Thorne realized. Silas Finch hid her here, and the geometric grid used her proximity to the cradle to imprint the only image it could not corrupt, the original, full photograph of its host, Kenji Sato. The absence was not the subject, it was the geometric grid that hunted the light. By imprinting its final image onto Rina, it had created the ultimate, living photograph of absence, forever preserved in the cistern. The final memory was secured, and the final victims were now the final, living subjects of the absence. Detective Anya Sharma and Deputy Ben Thorne faced the grim aftermath of the final confrontation. The absence was contained within the projector casing, but its final act was to turn its two human subjects, Kenji Sato and Rina, into living, physical analog archives of the memory it sought to erase. The silent archive. Anya and Thorne secured the access to the cistern, leaving Rina and the photograph untouched. They understood the terrifying nature of the containment. Rina, with her empty eyes and monotone voice, was the analog archive, the ultimate, permanent storage medium for the absence's final memory. The absence had failed to destroy the image, so it chose to preserve it in the only medium it couldn't corrupt, a human mind removed from the chaos of visual time. Kenji Sato, now returned to the precinct, was placed in the care of county psychiatrists, diagnosed with a unique form of catatonia. He rarely moved, but when he did, his movements were performed with an uncanny, perfect rhythm, the precise rhythm of the perforator's click, as if his body were a clock recording the sound of the geometric code. He was the auditory archive, physically encoding the anomaly's geometric pattern into his very muscle memory. Thorne retrieved the final artifact from the cistern, the sepia-toned photograph of Sato and Silas Finch. The image, once a ghost, was now crisp and stable. Anya placed the photograph back inside the secure, sealed projector casing. The casing remained cold and inert. The absence was not gone, it was satisfied. It had achieved a perfect, analog equilibrium. The enduring contamination. The police chief ordered the print house demolished, and the site was paved over. The projector casing, the analog archive, Rina, and the auditory archive, Sato, were all removed from the public record. 1 year later, Anya and Thorne received a commendation for closing the cold case involving the disappearance of Rina and Sato. The official report cited a tragic electrical accident and subsequent structural collapse. They were the only two people who understood the true nature of the solution. One late night, Thorne was working in the records room, manually archiving old photographs, an analog task he now preferred. Anya walked in and saw him working. He was meticulously trimming the edges of each photograph with a razor-sharp scalpel. "Careful with those edges, Thorne," Anya said, referencing the razor precision of the original blank resume. Thorne looked up, his expression empty, but his eyes were focused on the edges of the photograph. "The absence showed me, Detective," Thorne said, his voice quiet and level. "The visual memory is always strongest at the boundary." He then showed Anya his final trimmed photograph. The image was normal, but along the razor-cut edge, the paper was subtly bleaching white, a tiny, physical trace of the print of absence appearing where the paper was stressed. He had developed a compulsion to recreate the physical contradiction that the anomaly exploited. The whispering legacy. Anya looked at Thorne. He wasn't the subject, but he was the final observer, cursed to see the geometric contradiction of the absence in the world's visual and physical records. She then